This book is an in-depth glimpse of what Temple Grandin's life is as she navigates her day-to-day life, thinking about different things that she experiences and how she thinks in pictures to make her perceptions her reality.
I see this book as it's a portrayal of her evolution, and it shows how the mind of a person with autism can really evolve and grow.
And this book also has implications for what teachers can do to best suit the needs of students with autism or any students on autism spectrum.
I think one of the main concepts in the book is Temple Grandin tries to kind of give the idea that there are different types of autism, not just one.
Really the only use for diagnosis of autism is to get services, basically, for your child or your student. Because diagnosis is really subjective, because it's based on behaviors and there's no real, there's no real concrete way of measuring it.
Labeling seems to be something that she is not real fond of either. She's I think her basic strategy is like attack the symptoms and think about how to deal with the particular behaviors.
I really appreciated how Temple Grandin, in one part of the story, she mentions how if someone had given her the choice to live without autism, she decided that she would actually want to live with autism because she feels that her autism is actually one of her strengths.
I like what you say about the strengths of autism, and Temple Grandin really stresses how everyone with autism has strengths, and it's very important for us to help them build those strengths and find a purpose for them in society. This also kind of ties in with her spiritual evolution that she talks about, because I think one of the main points of the book as far as interpretation goes is that she realizes near the end that she does need nurturing, and she connects that to her purpose and her work and her spirituality. And I think we need to remember that they might not, the autistic children that we work with, they may want to retreat and they may want to avoid connections to the world around them and to social connections, but we need to remember that they really do get a lot from connections, from being a part of their world and from connecting to people.
In chapter 5, Grandin talks about developing the talent of people with autism and mentions some suggestions that are really relevant to teachers in the education field. She mentions, for example, creating very structured activities, reading out loud as a key to silent reading, being creative and unconventional in the classroom, mentoring, moving learning outdoors or beyond the traditional classroom, and using video cameras like we're doing today, or tape recorders to teach lessons.
I have the privilege of working with students on the autism spectrum. One of our strategies is, since we are aware of sensory overload, we try to make sure that when a student walks into the classroom and they sit down at their desk, we make sure that their desk is completely clean, so there's no distractions on it. Another one is also goes to the sensory load. We have these things, they're called, basically they are seats with a whole bunch of bumps on them, and basically what that does is it relieves some of the stress in their lower body. That way, if they're kind of like antsy, kind of moving like this, it puts pressure against their body, so then they're able to have their muscles relaxed, helping them to focus. We have these things, they're called squishy balls, and students can squish them as they were listening to the instructor, helping them to focus. That way, they're doing something with their hands.
When you're working with medications, you only want to make one change at a time, so like, just so you can see what happens. So with diet, with supplements, with medication, just change one thing at a time. Keep the dosage as low and consistent as possible, because the medications have risks. And to weigh the benefits with the risks. One of the things I remember her saying in her video, the way I see it, was you should have a wow moment. You should be like, wow, that really works. Otherwise, a lot of those drugs aren't really worth the risk.
One of the articles that I read that we're going to talk about in addition to Temple Grandin's book was called Ecological Approaches to Transition Planning for Students with Autism and Asperger's Syndrome. And it was a great article that really highlighted how social workers could benefit a great deal in high schools during transition planning. But social workers really have a lot of training in some of the ideas of social interactions, just the stress that can be involved in transitioning to college, where the content is has to be much more self-regulated for study. There's even talks about sexuality and social interactions and friendships and things like that are things that social workers could really benefit this kind of process.
She had a lot of insight on transitions into college and into employment. She emphasized teaching basic life skills, obviously developing strengths, and being really sure to connect to possible careers, no matter how obscure they might be, by selling the student's work instead of selling the person, not necessarily going through the regular process of employment that most people do, but getting their portfolio to the right person so they can see their work. And she talks about support in college, tutors for uneven skills, which are really common on the autism spectrum, aides in the class, mentors, and joining clubs, which she also recommends through school as kind of a respite from bullying and teasing. She covers a lot of information about empowering people on the autism spectrum. She talks about early intervention being extremely important. Autism has to be diagnosed in the first 18 months. Some of the common characteristics we've talked about plenty is lack of eye contact, repetitive behaviors, and little interest in social interactions. She really emphasizes having higher expectations in how people with autism need pushing a little bit to kind of engage them and bring them back into the world so that they can learn, and that helps their self-esteem. She emphasizes personalizing teaching, building on strengths, and expanding fixation. So if students they're fixated with stairs or whatever teeny little particular thing it is, to say, okay, well, let's look at all the different kinds of stairs, or let's represent stairs in different ways, or so to expand it as much as you can by build on their interests. I think it's about like remembering what they need.
I really enjoyed the passion that students with autism bring into the classroom, and just bringing that general enjoyment. into life.
Panic attacks and anxiety occur in both people with autism and normal people.
People on the autism spectrum need to feel connection and purpose just like everyone else.
Einstein had many traits of an adult with autism or Asperger's spectrum. Nope, sorry, let me do that again.
When
Oh God! No, don't ever say God.
social interaction revolves around shared interest.